Hey guys, Manga Matt here with the September manga update. Alright, let's see. First up, we'll go with Pokémon XY Volume 4. Of course, these when you get these sort of uber small volumes like these that are barely at 100 pages, it's kind of hard to really kind of make any comment about plot development or anything, because two of these put together make like one volume, so it's the equivalent of like the end of the second volume. But well, I guess here we learn, I guess, a little bit more about like Mega Evolution and actually get an appearance by Manectric. I think I'm saying that right, but that Pokemon becomes another one of X's partners and actually gets his own Mega Stone to evolve into Mega Manectric. I like that it doesn't go with sort of the typical powerhouse Pokemon, that it makes things more varying. And then also some of the more interesting Pokemon, like this little bear one that I remember from playing the games, that actually in one of its little details that if you flick its ears, it goes into kind of like a berserk thing. That's another thing that the Pokemon does a lot of, is it will incorporate a lot of the description details from the Pokedex entries and incorporate that into the plot as to a possible weakness or a possible strength or some other kind of non-battle usage for a Pokemon in the series. So it's kind of refreshing that they don't just either make stuff up for the show just for like dramatic purposes, or that they just completely leave out certain details for, again, plot convenience or dramatic tension. Then let's see, next Toriko volumes 29 and 30, which 29 to 30 marks the transition to the ending of the first major arc and the beginning of the new arc of Toriko. I thought this was a pretty excellent kind of conclusion, where everything this may have been the most dramatic kind of ending for a major manga arc since possibly Naruto. I mean, as far as Bleach had kind of a big arc at the end of Soul Society, but it didn't really feel like there was as big of a major transition aside from like the power upgrade. Like, you didn't feel like everything's different now. But with Toriko, you definitely get that sense that the beginning of volume 30, things in the gourmet world are now dramatically different. And also I love in this arc where it's kind of the conclusion of President Igo's ultimate full course meal, and how it creates a never-ending supply of food, which is what they were rumored to possibly create from an earlier volume, and how that works out. And I love the little creatures that appears, the creature that's a part of that food supply gimmick. I thought it's like the way it's presented, the way it came about, and then its usefulness, all was just this perfect idea that kind of accentuates kind of the mad genius in Toriko with the different little animals in here. And then also possibly the only weird thing from this volume that I got was near the end they make this big revelation that Toriko's world may in fact be slightly different from our world, or that our world is sort of this pretext version of Toriko's world, and that's revealed when they discover something unique about a particular mineral that seems to be everywhere on Earth except for this one precise spot. They notice that like here's like the entire gourmet world stretched out flat, but they notice that when you zoom in, this one section they think might be even older than the rest of the world, which you can clearly tell that's supposed to be our world map. But when you think about it, it like that doesn't make sense because Columbus showed us that the world is round, so the only way you would get like all 7 continents to still be there is if something happened, the world like sort of flattened itself out, and then you added all the extra land mass around it. It's kind of like if it's a world, if our world started like that and then it expanded, like I could imagine like maybe if it expanded out like this, you'd still have this half of the hemisphere that you would be able to see. So maybe like either Africa and Asia, or if it's the other side, maybe just North and South America. But again, it doesn't make sense in the way the map is done, how like the world like just became completely flat and then it expanded on its land masses like that. That's probably just he was just looking at like the world map, and then he just was like bigger, and then like did that without really thinking about kind of how that would work topographically like that. I thought that that's one of those little nitpick things that's like I pick up on. But regardless, again, the arc is amazing, and sort of the new kind of adventure that they're embarking on is also pretty amazing for Toriko and gang. And next up, Basara Volume 18 and 19. I've kind of been slowing down on my Basara reading, but it's still absolutely amazing, especially with all of them. With them kind of recruiting all of these various dissenters in the main republic against King Ukon, and especially they're in this one area ruled by the Black King, who's I guess like the second to the last major villain that they have to deal with. And you also get some interesting history behind the White King, who is actually a woman, and what her main beef is. And you actually kind of find out like she's even a bigger player than any of the other ones. It's kind of like that interesting kind of like you've been dealing with these villains, and now this is kind of the first big major extra villain on top of that. I kind of wish that Shuri was kind of still playing a bigger role, but I guess like that's gonna come in a little bit later. Then Vinland Saga Volume 6, which it's kind of odd that the cover features these two characters, because in this collection they're actually very minor to the plot. They kind of just show up and they're done, but they do have a pretty super tragic backstory, and I guess most of it is kind of tied to how Thorfinn is sort of feeling right now. Thorfinn still kind of feels like, I guess, that he doesn't really have much of a destiny or any kind of grander plans in place for himself, and then also at the same time King Canute is busy trying to unite all of Europe under his rule, and whether or not he's going to just descend into madness or go crazy with power or something like that, that's also to be seen. Whether or not he's gonna follow in his father's footsteps or not, that's always a very what was his name? Makoto Yukimura. He says repeatedly in the afterwords of these volumes that everything about Vinland Saga is about relationships between father and son. Pretty much everything, all of the major characters and character arcs in Vinland Saga is about the impact that a father has on their son, the impact that a son has on the father, and what the two get from the other in that relationship and that bond, and especially what can happen then, with the absence of a father, and the sort of, and just kind of how, the crimes or sins of the father are inherited by the son, and kind of everything like that. It's an interesting kind of story, and it's a great kind of theme that I guess you can always kind of revisit in something like this. It's a very kind of a universal concept or idea, which again is not to say like there's nothing equivalent to that in a mother-daughter relationship, but given the fact that this is like in the Vinland, and I mean not in the Vinland, but that this is like Norse, and the like the 1100s and stuff. I guess it's just there's gonna be a lack of female characters that play a prominent role, because subsequently they were never a big part in sort of those societies, and given that Yukimura wants to be very, faithful to the period and to the times, it would be interesting, because I remember, Planetes had, I think like it was a near even split between female to male characters and how well defined they were, that it's almost a little bit odd that he's kind of tilted so far into the male character base, without, I mean, aside from maybe Thorfinn's sister, who barely even gets referenced, I think, ever. That's it as far as major female characters getting developed in here. So it's a little lacking in that, but aside from that, I think it's still one of the best things coming out. Just wish that he'd kind of make them a little more regular in his production. Then another omnibus here, 2-in-1, is Mobile Suit Gundam The Origin Volume 11, which this is the penultimate volume of the Gundam manga series. This also features a lot of those big iconic moments in the series, the fight between Amuro and Char and Lala, the fight between Char and Amuro with Char in the Zeong, the death of some of the other member of House Zabi. There's even a kind of interesting twist in here where Sayla like purposefully got herself captured so she could get on Cecilia's ship, so that Sayla could inspire a mutiny on the ship by pronouncing herself as Artesia, of the Zeon Daikun, and actually try and get some supporters and some remnant faithfuls from the House of Rawl to actually help her start a mutiny on the ship. And that I don't think was ever done in the anime, but it's an interesting added layer as to why that everything at that finale was so chaotic. Was if you add in this sort of mutiny going on the ship, then you can kind of believe more that a small ragtag group could have taken down this last major battleship in the Zeon fleet. So it's kind of interesting. Again, it's a gorgeous coloring, gorgeous artwork, and it's still like probably one of the best drawn, best written, best produced manga that you can probably find. And let's see, Deadman Wonderland Volume 10, which follows sort of the aftermath of all of the inmates getting out of the Deadman Wonderland prison, and actually everybody having to get sort of reinstated to go back into the Deadman Wonderland, because it turns out that there's some kind of a failsafe system, the Mother Goose program that's at the core of Deadman Wonderland that that acts as kind of like a safety guard on the wretched egg, which is, I guess, the most powerful dead man that was ever created, that could cause like these massive earthquakes, and was actually the cause of a lot of the major disasters from the beginning of the series. And you know, Ganta is of course reluctant because he knows what that's going to mean with him having to face down you know, the wretched egg and who that turns out to be, and you know, his kind of interconflict about that, and then also just all of the other villains who are also wanting the wretched egg and the Mother Goose program for their purposes. Still a really great series. New Lone Wolf and Cub Volume 6, which featured Togo with let's see, yeah, Togo, who has to try and take him and Daigoro to this to get trained in sword combat, but of course this first involves him and Daigoro finding this sort of hidden kingdom in the sands, because it turns out in the sands there's like this one major deposit of gold that's been kept secret, and part of that has been because of the location. It's around a lot of these sinkholes and quicksand pits that, you know, if you don't know how to navigate properly, you can just get sucked right in and die. And you know, Togo and Daigoro managed to like sort of prove their worth and their honor to him and to the king, and they kind of, and this all erupts in this big climactic battle in this desert area, which is kind of interesting because like some of them are having to move kind of slow because they're walking on these sort of like safe spots along the trail that, you know, as long as you walk on that, you won't sink in, but if you miss, then you could fall for several feet and then drown in sand. And you know, it's kind of an interesting sort of idea. And then also Daigoro was actually doing a little more fighting, which actually becomes sort of useful in this volume because this huge sandstorm hits, and so Daigoro, because of his smaller stature, he doesn't sink in the sand quite as much as like a full-grown adult, and he's actually a little more maneuverable, and he actually has there's a bit of an asset to his physique in that. And then Naruto Volume 72, which is the final volume in the Naruto series, which I thought was a great ending. I thought it was deserving of the series. Again, I've said this before, I don't know why people give Naruto so much crap about its storylines, and I mean, I guess most of that is directed towards Sasuke and not necessarily the series in its entirety, which I guess I can agree somewhat that Sasuke's arc is lacking in areas, but you compare that to like Bleach, compare that to the last arc of Dragon Ball Z with Boo, and I mean, you know, I think a lot of people forget especially how problematic that last arc of Dragon Ball Z was, and how completely manic, unfocused, and ultimately kind of unsatisfying of an ending it really kind of was. Like, that was kind of, the ending of Dragon Ball Z was more than anything and a proof that Dragon Ball Z had to end, because it would have only been less so from it would have only been of lesser quality from that point on. It's not like Naruto here, where you do get the sense that everything is tying up, that this is the conclusion that was meant to be for it. So I did like it. A lot of people are talking about Boruto, which, I mean, like, I don't know, and it could be good, could be bad, I don't know. You never know about some of these things. Then let's see. Next up, we get what is it here? Oh yeah, Inuyashiki Volume 1, which, some of you are going to be like, Matt, I thought you hated Gantz. Why would you pick up a new series by the guy that you're rather unimpressed with? Well, for one, I've read in some interviews that Hiroya Oku, he's only planning this series to be like 10 volumes or somewhere just around that line. So I get the feeling that there's going to be a lot more, like, it's not going to fall off the rails. Like, even Gantz didn't fall off its rails until after, like, volume 20 or so. So, and that, and also, like, I like the concept of sort of this old man who is rebuilt as kind of this robot sort of hero kind of being, and kind of he's having, like, sort of an existential crisis about, like, he's dead now, basically, because, like, he's certainly not human anymore, and, like, does he still have all the responsibilities he had when he was alive? Can he just, like, do whatever? Because he's like, hey, I'm dead. You can't hold me to something anymore because I'm dead. It's like some of those ideas are kind of neat, and then also, like, the idea that you see so many of these, like, younger protagonists that this happens to, but, like, just the fact that this is focused around, like, an older person or a person of older age, that makes things a lot more interesting, I think, because it's just kind of like a whole demographic thing, like Bubba Hotep. Like, part of the charm of Bubba Hotep is the fact that all of the main characters in that are these older men that are trying to fight this reanimated mummy in this nursing home, and something like this, he's an older man that was, like, rebuilt as, like, a sort of fighting machine being, and he's planning to try and make things better for the people around him. And I thought that's kind of a interesting idea, that just having the focus be on, like, an older person than if it were just, like, a kid or something. Like, that's at least something I haven't seen. Then Ajin Demi-Human Volume 6, which this actually goes into a lot of detail, especially with what's her name, Izumi, and kind of what happened to her to make her become a Demi-Human, or to get her IBM to manifest, which you find out that the IBMs, the black creature things that Demi-Humans can project, requires a very select kind of condition to bring that out, and also you get a little bit of sort of a training montage with what's his name, the main character in this series, and how he's kind of trying to learn to use his IBM in a more controlled manner, and you get a lot more interesting ideas about what the IBMs are and how they relate to demi-humans in their fights. Alright, sorry about that. And then next up, Attack on Titan, Volume 16, which actually sort of explains a lot of stuff that's been going on kind of in a big way with Attack on Titan. We get a glimpse into a lot of the history and sort of how a lot of the major families, I guess, that are being established from, like, since Volume 10 and on, how the family structure kind of works, and sort of a little more of kind of what Titans are and how they fit into everything with humanity, and how all of that led to the world they live in now with Attack on Titan. There's a lot more mystery and stuff going on, but you do get a sense that answers are coming for a lot of those major plot revelations. It's just gonna, I guess, matter whether or not it comes in due time, or if it'll be too little too late by the time a lot of that comes around. A lot of people are relating Attack on Titan to Lost in the way that you're getting a lot of these sort of mysteries and unknowns with the storyline, and whether or not those are going to get paid off. A lot of people felt burned with sort of the ending of Lost and how a lot of things were wrapped up or not wrapped up by the end of it. And I guess something like Attack on Titan, that's understandably more action packed. You wonder, if it can back up its claims and a lot of the notoriety and hype that it's getting. But so far, it's on the trail to still being one of the best manga series that has debuted in probably the last decade or so. Then finally, gonna close out this update with a series that initially I wasn't going to get, but then I found out, that it was a rather short run, and then I wound up getting it, and I wound up absolutely loving it. That series is Maria, the Virgin Witch, which comprises the 3 volumes and then the subsequent Exhibition volume, which contains a bunch of short stories that take place in various points along the main storyline, which this is just kind of extra little stories that maybe he couldn't fit into the series in a really sort of coherent way, but still otherwise flesh out a lot of smaller details in the Maria Virgin Witch storyline. But this series, I absolutely enjoyed it. It's very short, only 3 volumes, and it focuses on Maria, who is a witch, but she's a witch during a time when there's this great war going on, the War of the Roses, between the Lannisters and I forget the other group, but there was essentially this big war going on between England and France, and Maria has decided, she's a French witch, and she has decided to, I guess, work on trying to basically stop all of the war going on. Like, she's very anti-war, so anytime there's like a new battlefront coming up, she'll sort of appear and she'll try to use her magic to essentially kind of stop both sides from fighting. Like, she'll summon a giant dragon that sort of devastates the area, and then nobody wants to fight anymore. Or she'll use her succubus to kind of visit the men in their stalls the night before and essentially drain their life force and make them too weak or too unmotivated to want to fight the next day. And all of this kind of comes to a head when her exploits kind of catch a little too much attention, and Michael, the archangel, comes down and basically tells Maria that she's no longer allowed to interfere in that kind of extreme way with people, and that also if she's gonna stay convicted to her mission, that she's going to have to choose between that and her own personal happiness, which essentially means that that if she ever loses her virginity, she also loses all of her magic powers. And it was that initial gimmick with the whole oh, you have sex and you'll lose your powers thing, that I initially didn't want to read this series, because it felt like kind of one of those cheapish sort of harem series, or one of those ecchi series where the whole joke is around her not wanting to have sex, or she can't have sex or something, and that being played up for cheap laughs or something. But surprisingly enough, the series stays very focused on kind of Maria's wants and goals in life, and also on her minions and kind of sort of this bigger kind of ideals, her ideals clashing with those of God and of the heavenly beings, and how Maria is sort of in direct opposition of that. Maria will sort of question God about why God won't directly intervene to stop all of this bloodshed and madness, and how dare they come down on her for wanting to be so selfless in her acts, and then even the notion of sort of the futility of it, the fact that you can stop them from warring now, but it's kind of like, if you're gonna just be there to help those when they want your help, then you're not really trying to stop everything at once. Like, what about all the suffering that's happening over there? Or she also lives in this little cottage, and another thing is that if you ask for her help, she'll help you. But it's the fact of she's only helping those that want the help, rather than just going out and just trying to help as many people as possible. Or it's kind of like this notion of if you're gonna do everything, like, why do you just narrow your focus, and instead of like trying to do as much as possible, kind of thing. It's a lot of these kind of philosophical notions of charity, and how people perceive charity, and how people perceive what to do in terms of like personal responsibility. Like, when you have the ability to do good, how do you properly channel that? Also the notion of whether or not pursuing personal happiness is a selfish endeavor, or is pursuing personal happiness an essential part of understanding what happiness is defined as, in order for you to then be able to pursue a more like in general happiness. Like, if a person isn't happy being themselves, or happy with their own set in life, then is that justifiable in that person wanting to try and make other people happy? Like, do I want to be trained by a karate dojo teacher who himself has never practiced karate before? Like, sort of like that thing. Like, if you can't define happiness for yourself, then how does that speak for wanting to try and make everybody happy? And it goes into a lot of those kind of details. I really wasn't expecting Maria the Virgin Witch to really be as thought-provoking as it was, especially for how short it is. Like, they jump to a lot of different they keep the pacing very, very steady in this, and you kind of wonder by about the end of Volume 2 how they're going to wrap everything up at Volume 3. I also like sort of the embroidery and design. It's very kind of this, very Frenchy, and I guess that was kind of the point, given that Maria is herself French. And just I highly recommend Maria the Virgin Witch to anybody that likes a lot of those sort of fantasy series that's kind of that knows how to take its subject matter seriously. I like the design on her broomstick, where it looks more like in the design of like a pitchfork. It's similar enough but different a little to sort of make itself its own thing, and it doesn't feel the need to explain in great detail about everything, but it's like this perfect kind of, it gives you one good story, and it knows not to bullcrap around with a lot of these other little things that it knows aren't really that important. And even the stuff in Exhibition, a lot of this isn't truly necessary for the main series, but the little bits in here do add up and are interesting thoughts for the main series itself. But of course, this series is in no way, I think, like anti-God or anti-religion. I think it's very possible that a person who is very devout in Christianity could see it that way, because of course people who are very devout religious, they're always more sensitive to any topic relating to that, and the open sort of examination or analysis of that topic than, say, a person outside of that religion making comments about it. If you can look past that, and the way I see it is that, the God in any kind of fiction or literature is that God, and not, capital G God. That's how I always see it. Like, nobody, like, you can always tell, like, when author or writer is talking about, like, their idea of Christianity or something, and whether or not they're just taking ideas and thoughts about Christianity and putting it into a piece of work to create a kind of sort of idea or thought that's not necessarily aimed at it. Like, in here, I don't think, like, he was trying to make any sort of big statement about Christianity, whereas something like, if you ever read Preacher by Garth Ennis, it's almost unavoidable to read Preacher and not get the sense of what Garth Ennis is trying to say about Christian religion in a whole. Or, again, if you read, like, Neil Gaiman's Sandman, Seasons of the Mist, you don't get the sense that Neil Gaiman is making some sort of statement about Christianity or any other kind of religion in that story, but just making kind of a literary notion about it in the story itself. But anyway, that's all I got for this manga update, and I'll check you again next month.